So I want you to imagine, just for a second, a completely different way to measure your life. Like, just strip away all the usual metrics you use to define yourself every morning.
Right, the things we usually obsess over.
Exactly. Forget your bank account balance. Forget your job title, the neighborhood you live in, your social standing, or, how many followers you have.
It's hard to do, but yeah.
It is. But imagine instead that your ultimate success in life isn't judged by any of those earthly milestones, but rather by your exact coordinates on this massive cosmic scale of consciousness.
Which is such a wild concept because it forces a total reevaluation of human ambition. You stop asking the question of, what am I achieving today? And you really have to start asking, what am I fundamentally becoming?
And that is the exact landscape we are exploring in today's deep dive. We're looking at this highly specific, honestly, totally fascinating philosophical framework. It's laid out in an essay titled, Why Should We Learn Throughout Our Lives?
Yeah, written by Xue Feng in April of 2024.
Right. And the mission here today is to really unpack this very precise architecture of existence that he lays out.
Because the text categorizes all life into these distinct, evolving tiers. And the author makes a really compelling argument that relentless, lifelong learning, especially when coupled with immediate action, isn't just like a hobby to make you more interesting at dinner parties.
Right, it's not just reading for fun.
Exactly. Within this framework, it is literally the only mechanism available to level up your consciousness before your biological clock runs out.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we can even talk about the why of learning, we really have to wrap our heads around the universe the author is describing here.
We do. Yeah.
Because Svekin presents a reality where, well, the realm of life is infinite.
Infinite and staggeringly varied. I mean, the fundamental premise of the essay is that different beings have vastly different experiences of existence itself.
Like completely different realities.
Yeah. Right. And there's this direct correlation at play. The more advanced the being's consciousness, the more colorful, wondrous, and free their experience of reality actually becomes.
And the text gives us some really specific, kind of jarring, contrasting examples to illustrate this. Like, early on, the author compares the life experienced in what they call the second home community versus the life experienced in a traditional marriage and family setting.
Yeah, that part is super interesting. The second home concept in this text represents this massive paradigm shift away from private ownership.
Which is huge.
Right, because think about traditional marriage and the nuclear family. They're built on exclusivity, my spouse, my house, my children.
Yeah, very, very territorial.
Exactly. It's inherently possessive, which in this framework creates friction and attachment. But the second home community is described as a more advanced communal existence.
Like a higher tier of living together.
Right. It's a place where beings interact without that heavy emotional and material baggage of claiming ownership over one another. So the quality of life there is fundamentally lighter.
And then, the scale just zooms way out from there. The author goes far beyond human social structures and starts comparing entirely different dimensional planes.
Oh, yeah.
Like, the text contrasts the experience of living in a 1,000-year world with living in a 10,000-year world.
Which introduces this whole element of time and biological burden. Because in our current reality, our consciousness is constantly interrupted by the urgent need to survive.
Right, like, I have to eat, I have to sleep.
You have to cure diseases, stave off aging, pay rent, all of it. The author suggests that in a 1,000-year world or a 10,000-year world, those biological burdens are vastly reduced.
So they just don't have to worry about that stuff.
Basically, beings in those realms live exponentially longer, meaning their consciousness isn't trapped in survival mode. Their daily experience is completely unimaginable to us because it isn't governed by the constant threat of imminent death.
Wow. And to really drive home the sheer scale of this universe, the author provides this sweeping, almost infinite menu of existence. Swiffing essentially asks you, the reader, what you would choose to be if you had the ultimate choice.
Right, the ultimate blank check.
Yeah. But the text doesn't just list, like, human archetypes. The author includes ghosts, insects, snakes, turtles, willows, bamboo, eagles, wolves, lions.
It's quite the list.
It just keeps going, all the way up through humans to sages, land celestial beings, deity celestial beings, super celestial beings, Buddhas, and gods.
And if you look at that spectrum from a philosophical standpoint, you can see the metric of consciousness the author is applying. Like, why is an eagle placed higher than a willow tree but below a human?
Oh, that's a good question.
It's all about mobility, perspective, and freedom from pure instinct. The willow is physically rooted to the ground, The eagle has flight and a broader perspective, but it's still bound by its predatory instinct.
Ah, okay, so it's a progression.
Exactly. As you move up the list, the defining characteristic of a higher life form is an increasing degree of freedom and a broader awareness of the universe.
And obviously, the author assumes that most people, if handed that menu and given a magic wand, would choose to jump straight to the top. I mean, everyone wants to be a god, a Buddha, or a celestial being.
Of course, who wouldn't?
Right. But reading that list, it made me think of walking into one of those massive, sprawling shopping malls. You walk through the doors, you know you want to go to the high-end restaurant on the top floor, so you find the giant directory map.
Yeah, the big glass board.
Exactly.
Right.
But that map is utterly useless to you. Like, no matter how badly you want to reach the top floor, unless you can first locate that little red star that says, "You are here."
What's fascinating here is that the author relies on that exact same logical foundation. A frame of reference is totally non-negotiable.
You have to know where you're starting.
Right, you cannot set a trajectory for your spiritual or conscious development without first coldly, objectively pinpointing your exact current position. Wishing you were a celestial being does absolutely nothing if you are operating with the daily habits of an insect.
Right, exactly. So let's find our "You are here" star.
Hmm.
We need to explore exactly how the author categorizes the human experience. Because we aren't just thrown into one giant bucket labeled humans. The author slices human existence into 4 highly specific levels.
Yeah, and the lowest tier of the human experience, according to the text, is the ignorant person.
Which sounds harsh, but the definition provided for the ignorant person is someone who basically lives their entire life on autopilot. They are in a daze.
Just going through the motions.
Yeah. They blindly follow trends, and they adopt public opinion as their own without ever subjecting it to any real critical thought.
They lack an internal locus of control. They are entirely reactive to their environment, much like a leaf blowing in the wind. Which brings us to the next level up on the human tier, the worldly person.
Okay, how's that one different?
Well, this individual is highly motivated, but their focus is directed entirely outward towards social validation. They dedicate all their energy to making money, climbing the social hierarchy, and basically strategically positioning themselves to be envied by others.
So it's the ultimate status game. They know the rules of society, and they play to win them.
Exactly.
But then we hit the third human tier, which the author calls the mortal. And the definition of a mortal is someone who focuses their daily energy on maintaining their family, making sure their children lead good lives, growing their business, and working to make their nation prosper and their country strong.
Right.
Now, I have to push back on this categorization.
I suspect that tier is going to create friction for a lot of people.
It really is, because if you look at the life just described, taking care of your kids, building a solid business, being a pillar of your community, and supporting your country, I mean, society builds statues for people who do that.
It's the ideal, yeah.
That sounds like the absolute pinnacle of a highly successful, honorable, well-lived life.
Yeah.
Why does this philosophical framework frame that as just a mid-tier, restricted, mortal existence?
It feels incredibly counterintuitive because our conventional societal framework trains us to view legacy, family and nation as the ultimate good. But we really have to analyze this strictly through the lens of the author's metaphysics.
Okay.
The text isn't condemning the act of loving your children or building a business. It's categorizing consciousness based on the concept of attachment.
So by pouring all your energy into your bloodline or your nation,
Yeah.
you are tethering your consciousness to something temporary.
Precisely. Think about it. A business goes bankrupt. A nation eventually falls. A physical body ages and dies. As long as a being's primary daily focus is tied to these earthly material constructs, their consciousness remains anchored to the physical plane.
Ah, I see.
The text argues that you cannot reach a boundless, infinite cosmic state if your mind is entirely occupied by the maintenance of finite physical forms. The mortal is honorable, yes, but they are anchored.
Wow, okay. Which perfectly sets up the fourth and final human tier, the sage. The author defines the sage as someone who can assess situations deeply and think rationally. But there's a crucial caveat. They are still bound by forms.
Right. The sage represents the absolute ceiling of human intellect. They can see the matrix for what it is, they recognize the vanity of the worldly person, and they clearly understand the attachments of the mortal.
They see the whole board.
They have perfect rational clarity. But recognizing a cage isn't the same thing as escaping it. The sage still plays by the rules of the physical world. They intellectually understand liberation, but their daily reality is still completely dictated by material forms.
Okay, so if being a brilliant rational sage or being an incredibly dedicated mortal parent isn't enough to reach the top,
Hmm?
what does it actually take to break through that ceiling? Like, what happens when a being actually starts shedding those earthly attachments?
Well, that boundary is where we leave the human tiers behind entirely and enter the cosmic realms. And the first step into that new reality is the celestial being.
And the text defines a celestial being as someone who has completely transcended material constraints. They exist in the spiritual realm. They no longer pursue wealth. They've entirely lost the fear of bodily death, and they effectively just ignore the material world.
Right, they've cut the anchor that holds the mortal down. Their consciousness is no longer occupied by securing resources or protecting a physical legacy.
They're free from it.
Yes. But in this framework, there is an even higher peak. Above the celestial being is the super celestial being, or the Buddha. This tier requires an evolutionary leap because this being frees themselves from both material constraints and spiritual constraints, living purely in the realm of the soul.
And at the absolute pinnacle of this entire cosmic ladder, you have the God. The author defines a God as a being existing solely in the world of consciousness, structure, and energy.
Pure existence.
Right. Because they are untethered from absolutely everything, they are capable of effortless transformation. And here's where it gets really interesting. Because tracing this progression from mortal to God feels less like a mystical journey and more like a blueprint for technology.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yes, specifically, it maps perfectly onto the evolution of computing.
You mean like the transition from physical machines to the cloud?
Exactly. Think about the mortal or the sage. That's your heavy physical hardware. You are a massive desktop computer sitting on a desk. You are undeniably tied to the material world. You take up space, you require physical maintenance, you break down.
Right, your hardware.
Then you evolve into a celestial being. You've managed to shed the bulky hardware, but you are still relying on an operating system like you are bound by spiritual rules and frameworks.
The software.
Yes. But as you move up to a Buddha and finally reach the God tier, you shed the software entirely. You become pure, raw data and energy, living entirely in the cloud of consciousness. You are completely untethered, omnipresent, and capable of instantly downloading into whatever form is required.
That analogy perfectly clarifies the core mechanism of the author's philosophy, because evolution in this universe is not additive.
What do you mean by that?
Well, society teaches us that to level up in life, we need to acquire more wealth, more titles, more knowledge, more responsibilities. We just keep adding. But this text argues that cosmic evolution is a progressive journey of subtraction.
Letting things go.
Yes, you are systematically shedding constraints.
Yeah.
You peel away the material anxieties, then you peel away the spiritual dogmas until there is absolutely nothing restricting the pure energy of your consciousness.
Okay, so we now have the entire map unrolled in front of us. We've traced the path from the rooted willow tree, up through the ego of the worldly person, past the rational intellect of the sage, all the way to the pure, untethered data of the God tier.
The whole journey.
We've pinpointed our "you are here" star. But all of this theory brings us to the most practical, urgent question of this entire deep dive. How do we actually climb?
And the author provides a very direct, unequivocal instruction for this. We must learn, and specifically, the text dictates that we must learn from higher beings. We have to study the gods, the Buddhas, and the celestial beings.
But the text immediately introduces a massive caveat here. There is a vital distinction made between the act of learning and the act of practicing. Sufeng states that if you learn but do not practice, you remain merely a scholar. And the author is very clear, a scholar's life does not elevate.
This is where the philosophy really demands friction. Elevation across these cosmic tiers only occurs when learning is paired with immediate behavioral practice. You evolve step by step toward the life you aspire to only through action.
And I think we need to define what practice actually looks like in the context of shedding attachments. Because, if I read a book on how to build a deck, practicing means picking up a hammer. But if I'm reading about becoming a celestial being and shedding earthly tethers, what am I actually doing on a Tuesday afternoon to practice that?
That's the real challenge. Practice in this context means active detachment. If learning is reading a text about how the ego restricts consciousness, practice is the moment someone insults you at work, and you consciously choose not to retaliate or defend your status.
Oh, wow. That's hard.
It is. Or practice is realizing you are obsessing over expanding your business so you can buy a second home and actively deciding to redirect that energy. It's the physical, real-world application of untethering yourself from the things the worldly person and the mortal care so deeply about.
Which really reveals the real danger of getting stuck as just a scholar. Because if you are just reading about detachment, but you're still fighting for promotions and stressing over your legacy, you are essentially just a spiritual hoarder.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the danger of the scholar is perhaps the greatest trap of the modern age. I mean, we live in an era of unprecedented information access. We consume thousands of hours of audio. We read endless articles. We scroll through philosophical quotes on social media all day.
Yeah, we feel so enlightened.
Right. We feel like we are evolving because we are accumulating data. But within this framework, if that knowledge does not fundamentally alter your daily behavior and sever your attachments, it is entirely empty. You are just a highly educated mortal who is still securely anchored to the mortal tier.
It's the illusion of progress.
Yeah.
You've memorized the entire map, but you haven't actually taken a single step out of the parking lot.
Exactly. The action is the only thing that generates evolution.
This brings us to the ultimate stakes of the essay, and it answers the question posed right in the title. Why should we learn throughout our lives? Why does this process of learning and practicing have to be a lifelong endeavor, regardless of whether you are 20 or 80 years old?
Well, the text offers a fascinating, totally nonlinear perspective on time. The author asserts that a day in the life of a 3-year-old, a 30-year-old, or 300-year-old is the exact same day.
Which is hard to wrap your head around at first.
It is, but time is not viewed as this degrading resource where your chances of evolution just expire as your body ages. Time is simply a continuous, ongoing opportunity for consciousness to shift.
And the goal of that continuous opportunity is to reach what the author calls the 0 point.
Right. The 0 point is the absolute threshold between levels. It is the invisible boundary you must cross to shed your current tier and elevate to the next. Like, for instance, evolving from a mortal to a celestial being.
But the author paints a pretty dire scenario regarding this threshold. Imagine you reach the age of 80. You've lived a respectable life, but you are still fundamentally operating as a mortal. Your daily thoughts are still anchored to your physical family, your property, your legacy.
The standard mortal anchors.
Right. The author states that if you die having missed the 0 point to become a celestial being by, quote, just a little bit, you don't get partial credit. You'll die and reincarnate right back into the mortal world to start the tier completely over. And the text refers to this reset as a great shame.
It really underscores the tragic consequence of halting the learning process. If you decide at age 60 that you've learned enough and you just stop practicing detachment, you basically guarantee your failure to cross that 0 point.
It's game over.
Yeah. But however, the text immediately offers the antidote to this tragedy, which lies in the power of rich, continuous experience.
The author describes how if you maintain the discipline of learning, literally anything can be the catalyst that pushes you across that threshold. It could be a broad phenomenon, a random event, one specific book, or even just a single sentence you overhear on the street.
Just one thing.
Yeah, any of these can suddenly trigger a massive transformative inspiration.
The philosophical concept introduced here is yitong baitom, which is the idea that understanding one core truth leads to the sudden understanding of all things. It's the mechanics of a chain reaction.
Oh, that makes total sense. It makes me think of staring at one of those magic eye illusion posters.
Oh, yeah.
You can stand there for hours staring at this chaotic pattern of colors. You are putting in the effort, you are learning the shapes, but all you see is just static noise.
Just a blur.
Exactly. And then, completely out of nowhere, your eyes shift focus by a fraction of a millimeter. The spark hits. Suddenly, the hidden three-dimensional image snaps into perfect clarity, and once you see it, you can never unsee it.
That sudden snap of clarity is crossing the 0 point. All the years of mundane, lifelong learning act as the kindling. You're stacking the wood day by day, year by year. That single sentence or that random event is merely the spark.
Ah, I love that analogy.
Without the decades of preparation, the spark would just fizzle out. But because you've maintained the practice, the spark triggers that cascading enlightenment, and you instantly enter a higher realm of consciousness.
Which leads directly to the final, really striking mandate of the essay. Shuifeng writes, even if you know you are going to die in the evening, never miss the learning in the morning and afternoon.
It is such a profound instruction. It removes the biological clock from the equation entirely. The condition of your physical body has absolutely no bearing on the potential of your consciousness.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Like sitting in traffic or walking the dog or heading into a board meeting? Doesn't this philosophy put an immense, almost suffocating pressure on every single day?
It sounds like it, yeah.
It feels like we're being told to treat every waking moment as this high-stakes scavenger hunt, just frantically looking under every rock for that one triggering sentence before we die and face the great shame of reincarnation.
Viewed through the lens of modern anxiety, it certainly sounds exhausting. But a deeper reading of the framework actually offers a much more grounded, peaceful approach. The mandate to learn in the morning, even if you die in the evening, isn't about frantic searching. It is about maintaining a posture of openness.
Okay, tell me more.
The accumulation of lifelong experiences isn't a scavenger hunt. It is the quiet daily work of preparing the soil of your mind. You aren't desperately trying to force enlightenment. You are simply ensuring that when that profound book falls into your lap, or when that quiet, paradigm-shifting event occurs, your consciousness is primed and ready to cross the threshold, rather than being too distracted by worldly attachments to even notice the spark.
There's a much better way to look at it. So let's briefly recap the journey we took today. We started by looking at the mundane reality of the ignorant person living on autopilot and blindly following the crowd.
Right.
We took a hard look at the worldly person and the mortal, recognizing how our daily obsession with status, legacy, and material success actually serves as a heavy anchor, keeping our consciousness tethered to the physical plane.
And then we outlined the mechanics of ascending the cosmic ladder. We explored the vital distinction between the empty accumulation of the scholar and the transformative power of actual real-world practice.
That's just so critical.
Yes. We examined the process of actively subtracting and shedding our material and spiritual constraints to ultimately reach that cloud-like state of pure, untethered consciousness and energy.
So as you continue with your day, I want you to examine your own routines. Look at your calendar, your budget, your daily frustrations. Are the actions you are taking today actively keeping you anchored to the mortal tier? Or are you finding moments to practice detachment, preparing the soil of your mind so that you are ready when the spark of inspiration finally arrives?
It requires a brutal honesty about where you are actually directing your life's energy.
It really does. And we want to leave you with one final, brand new thought to mull over that builds on everything we've explored today.
Okay, let's hear it.
If the ultimate destination of this cosmic hierarchy requires us to shed both our material and spiritual constraints, if the true goal is to exist purely as unstructured consciousness and energy, could the ultimate hidden purpose of lifelong learning actually be the rigorous process of unlearning everything that currently ties us down?
Wow, that fundamentally changes the definition of wisdom.
Right. Because perhaps the goal of life isn't to figure out how to accumulate more knowledge, more legacy, or more attachments. Maybe the real goal is to locate your exact coordinates on that cosmic map and then systematically drop the weight, belief by belief, until you're finally light enough to rise. Something to think about the next time you pick up a book or feel the urge to win an argument. Until next time.